Last time we covered the damage over time with the Sorceress Fire. Today we look at the more direct approach with the big three, Fireball, Firebolt, and Hydra. These three skills have been popular tools for ages, especially Fireball, though with the release of 2.4, Hydra has finally taken its role as a mainline skill rather than merely support, making this trio a very commonly sought after option for the first time since casting delays were introduced. Starting with the basis of these skills, we have the starter spell Firebolt, an often dismissed spell since, well, it's the level 1 fire damage spell, how useful could it be? The reality is, it sits in an interesting slot thanks to being one of the few damage spells without a scaling cost, but that has a solid synergy option to get it up to decent damage, albeit single target. The main usefulness of this is when fighting bosses or other solo enemies in a situation where you may have mana issues, or simply put, solo self-found runs or budget setups. This is because while once you've got your mid-tier gear like spirits and insight set up, you can get away with using fireballs, but you'd be a fool to pass up a 2.5 mana gut punch to a single target, especially since the other spammable fire options are generally going to be double-digit mana costs for similar amounts of punchiness. So if you're going solo self-found, don't be afraid to keep this on a hot swap for dealing with things like act bosses or small packs of enemies that don't need you bringing out your big guns like Meteor, Fireball, or Hydra. So don't let the fact that it's a level 1 skill hold you back from trying it out in your early builds, especially if you're going boss farming, since at certain higher levels, you actually can end up with it being stronger, for a single target at least, than its big brother Fireball. Speaking of the big brother though, Fireball is still the cornerstone of several builds, and for good reason. It's basically spammable like Firebolt, but it packs splash damage at the cost of, well, costing more mana. On most average uses, it will beat out Firebolt for raw damage, at least outside of those fringe cases we just mentioned earlier. It's just sometimes easier to assign it to the left click and not worry about swapping to maximize efficiency. As far as how it works pretty much like Firebolt in that it launches a projectile at the target and wham bam thank you ma'am, it's done. The big difference though is Fireball has that area of effect splash, which may not seem exceptionally large, but when aimed properly can still, well, properly decimate crowded enemies and deal plenty of damage per second to even justify its use over things like Meteor, especially if you're using a controller. Generally, the only thing you need to watch out for with it, and you'll find this with other splash skills like this, is that it will suck back some serious mana, so you'll want to swap over to it after you've got yourself squared away in regard to stuff like Warmth and Insight to keep you recovering quickly. But once you're there, just stack up that faster cast and go to town. The third skill in this list is Hydra. It's a one-way synergy with the other two, meaning Hydra gets bonuses from them, but it does not provide them back. But with the changes in 2.4, the Hydra is now finally back to being an interesting and actually competitive option. This is because with the patch, they made it so Hydras no longer have a cooldown, but rather they can only be cast up to a certain quantity at once, 6, letting you be much more mobile than in the previous versions of the skill. Now, as far as how the skill works, it's got quite a few quirks. Probably the most important one is to realize that Hydras may be summoned, but in terms of rainbow facets, masteries, and resist penetration, they act as if the Sorceress was using the attack that they use. So yes, Hydras will 100% benefit from +% fire damage, fire mastery, and minus enemy fire resist for the Sorceress, making them the only summon or construct with that distinction. Beyond that, they function essentially like traps with a timer rather than a shot limit, meaning they can shoot around corners as long as the enemy is in their awareness range, and there's actually 3 of them shooting at any given time, meaning they do 3 times the listed damage if all 3 heads are focused on the same target. Though they do only attack a little under once per second, so you're not going to see a single Hydra machine gunning something down. But a whole group of 6 will easily shred single targets. And I'm glad to see it finally justifying its placement as a capstone skill. So do you have a favorite fire skill? Mention it down below, and if you want to learn about the damage over time competitors in the tree, click the video on screen now, and as always, keep gaming, have fun, and peace out. This has been Alzorath. Bye.